Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff with Belite Podcast, aka Warriorzways. Today, I have a very special guest, Mr. Brian Yates. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here with you.
Man, I appreciate you for showing up, man. It's been quite a while.
I know.
Haven't seen you for almost, I think, 6 months.
Yeah. I mean, the last time I saw you, you were on a chair and grinding it out, trying to get back on your feet. Now you're back on your feet.
Yeah.
Love what you're doing here with the podcast, and you're just always that. You are that light for a lot of people, and it's always great to be around you.
Man, I appreciate you, man. I've been looking up to you for quite a while, man. And, every time I come in the gym, you're always about the business. You're always about movement and just, you're always in that zone, which is one thing I admire, man. It's that focus we put in anything we do. When we go to the gym sometimes, yes, we have the tendency to be social but our original goal is I'm going to the gym to work out. But when I came out there, you were about business. It's about this is me time, man. So thank you so much for coming on, man. And it's like I've been looking up to you since I met you. The first time we met, we talked about an important subject, man. Well, out of nowhere, it just started talking about mental health, started talking about important things that truly drives us as human beings, So guys, if you didn't know Brian, Brian first, he's a brother in Christ. What I admire about Brian is the relationship you have with God is just super strong, and you also a vet, you're a warrior, a true warrior, so it's truly an honor to have a true warrior, a real life warrior, and a warrior in Christ, sitting here right now.
I appreciate that.
Nah, man, I appreciate you. And you are also the CEO of 100 Proof Living, which we'll talk about, what that is and what that brings for people, So, Mr. Brian, tell me about Brian, man, because there's so much that makes you, and I want to just hear from you, man. And I'm sure people want to hear, who does Brian see in the mirror?
Wow. You got heavy there a second. Who does Brian see in the mirror? Well, it's funny because I think every year that goes by, I answer that question a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. My life experience hasn't changed other than what's happened in the last year. But, I was in the military. I did federal law enforcement. I did local law enforcement. Did some odd jobs in odd places overseas. Yeah. The resume doesn't change, but how I view it does. And I think that's biblical. I think that idea of less of us and more of him. And so I use a phrase, and it's not always true, especially people that know me, round the clock that know better. But, someday I would like to say I'm Jesus in a Brian suit. Right? And that's if you're fully surrendered and obedient and somehow you've truly died to self. And I struggle with that because, we're having a moment now where we can talk about our faith and where we hopefully project a message, but then I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive down the road. That's something in this world. And then maybe I'm running late, or I have work to do, or I have family responsibilities. Yeah. And then it's how do you juggle that? How do you live in this world but have a mind for eternity? So
wow. You
ask me who I am and who do I see in the mirror, I see somebody different all the time.
Wow.
Sometimes I see a scared little kid. Sometimes I see an arrogant man that, wants everyone else to see that tough guy side. And sometimes I think, there are those moments when I feel like I'm surrendered and I'm in that place that God wants me to be, where it's just open hands.
Yeah.
It's not about what I need to achieve or my goals. It really is about his will being done. So I see somebody different almost every day.
Wow. Not a lot of people see that perspective within themselves. They have this idea of, yeah, I am this, I am that, but when you surrender to Jesus, when you surrender to God, it's like you're a child of God, and you want to see Jesus in yourself. Not a lot of people have that, man. So I guess my next question is, were you always this faithful to God? Did you always have this strong faith?
Hell no. Maybe I'm not supposed to say that. No, absolutely not.
No, you are.
And in the last 24 hours, in the next 24 hours, there's going to be glimpses of me that show that I'm not that faithful.
Yeah.
No, and I do think that there have been, kind of stair steps of maturity. Maybe it's part of that sanctification process where he's changing me, where difficult times change me.
Yeah.
You just came out of a difficult time. You're still in it, but you're coming out of it.
Yeah.
So it comes and it goes. I mean, I think you look at the Old Testament and the Israelites were a nation, a people called by God and blessed. Yeah. And there's a cycle that I think we repeat today where when we're close to God, he blesses us with his presence and a lot of times with other things.
Yeah.
He made them a prosperous nation, and then they got fat, dumb, and happy and forgot about it.
Right.
And then he removed his favor.
Wow.
Then they find themselves in a hurt, and then they run back to him. And then when they're close to him, they're blessed, and then they kind of walk away. And sometimes that's a daily thing for me. I might wake up in the morning and, hey, today's going to be God's day, and I'm just going to, I'm going to just be an observer and see whatever he wants. Other days I get up on a mission because I got to get this done for work. And, I still take some of those crazy foreign trips. And, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if that's even the line of work I need to be in anymore.
Yeah.
Wow. But no, I think that, have I always been that way? Absolutely not. And I hope that next year you ask me the same question. Yeah. I'm like, no, last year I thought I had it figured out. Wow. No, so much happened in the last year, growth and learning new things and, thickening that worldview that we have with education and experience.
So we never truly figure out. We just, this year is this, tomorrow it's like, wow, what, I thought I knew everything.
Yeah, well, you think of the version of you 5 years ago.
Yeah.
You're like, man, what a fool. You'd clown that guy now because thought he had it all together, thought he had a plan.
Yeah.
And now 5 years later. So the wisdom in that isn't it likely that 5 years from now, you're going to pivot and be like, man, January 2024, I really didn't know all that much.
Yeah.
Right? Wow. Because we keep learning. And so I think that's where some humility can come in to just recognize that I'm not all that. And I'm not even where, if I think I'm at some place on my personal growth or my professional achievements or whatever, all I have to do is turn around and look, that's what I thought a few years ago.
Wow. Man, so let's revisit the time when you were 27. How was that? If you kind of went back, how was that time for you? And how did that time shape the Brian I'm sitting here today?
So, great question. That's when my kids were young. And so I was in it, I was busy. And I would say at the time, I was not very intentional. I was more just reacting to that space in life. Got to feed the kids, got to get the kids to school, got to discipline the kids, got to try to celebrate with the kids. And, but it's like life is happening to you.
Yeah.
And as I look back, I wish I would have been more intentional. I wish I would have had today's approach of get up in the morning and decide how my day is going to go.
Wow.
Rather than just letting it all happen to me. So I grew a lot then because I made a lot of mistakes then.
Yeah.
And so between then and now, that's almost twice. That's almost 27. I'm 52 now. That's almost half my life. But to our point before, I still I thought I was all that, thought I had, the family was in order, had some cool things going on at work and from the outside, but still inside I was like that duck paddling on the water, just trying to make it,
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
here you are almost 20 some years later. And,
Wow.
and some of that is still true. Like
Yeah.
part of me feels like I have learned some things and I've come a long way and that's great. But the older I get, the more I realize, man, I can't imagine what the 60-year-old version of me is going to look like.
Wow. That's just crazy, man. So how old were you when you went to the military? When you decided you
19.
went to 19? You went in the military at 19. Very young. That's when straight out of high school and say, you know what?
I wish I'd have gone straight out of high school. I actually went to college for a year and basically got shown the door.
Oh my goodness. For a year?
Yeah, for a year, and then I went in the military for 4 years.
Man, are you okay talking about the experience, that,
Oh, yeah.
that decision?
Yeah, because it was something I was always going to do. My plan was to go to college for 2 years, get some credits under my belt so that gives you a little bit of rank when you go in. And I was not ready for college. I didn't like party my brains out, but one thing I didn't do was go to class.
Wow.
So, I was in Southern California. I was going to Disneyland and going to the beach and, not trying to study. And so it only made sense for me to jumpstart the military. And, my father, my uncle, my best friend growing up was a year ahead of me. He went into the Air Force as well. There were people around that going to the military was a normative thing. Wow. It wasn't like, wow, this guy's some kind of hero. He's going to go off to the military. There were still a lot of people at that time taking that path. And so it was just kind of matter of fact to me. I was kind of always going to do that.
Wow. And you've already set that up in your mind saying, I'm going to go do this thing. And so we in the military now. And I listened to the podcast you did with Chris yesterday, and he stated that you're a war fighter as well. Like you witnessed a lot. Now, most people, when they come out of the military, after facing such traumatic events and actually being there, some of them don't even get out of that. Out of that traumatic. So what helped you in that time? And even when you came out, what was the mindset around life still moves on? I gotta let it go, and life still moves on. Like what was your mindset like in that?
Honestly, I think God protected me because I didn't. My military experience was pretty benign. I served in Desert Storm, but was not a party to combat there.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is later in life, I went, as I went into law enforcement, I saw much worse things. And then when I started doing the contracting thing and actually went into battle and saw some of I probably wasn't prepared for it. There's an interesting situation that happened when I was stationed in Korea, kind of luck of the draw or, hand of God.
Yeah.
I was on patrol one day and there was a call for an emergency off base in our civilian housing area. And I was all excited because my chance to go, be on scene, be the hero.
Wow.
And my supervisor came over the radio and called me off, told me to go. He sent me somewhere else. And I was frustrated. Yeah. But later that day, I found out that the emergency was that a dependent wife had killed and dismembered her children.
Whoa.
And at the time, I think I would have been 20 or maybe 21.
Yeah.
And I would have never been able to handle that. That would have wrecked me forever.
Wow.
Fast forward to my 30s and 40s when I'm, in a combat environment and see some of the horrendous stuff that happens to the human body. You hear mortars every day. You're going outside the wire. The beauty of a contractor is if I couldn't take it, I could just leave. When you're in the military, you can't. Mm-hmm. There's no option.
There's no option but to be there.
Right. And so when you're talking about mindset, when I came out of the military, I just wanted to get out and go do the civilian thing. And then I was ready for school. So school came much easier. I was ready to study.
Yeah.
That went well. when I went into law enforcement, it was the same thing. Like I just kind of driven to do it. Like I'm wired for that. I'm not wired to teach kindergartners, so don't ever ask me to do that. You know, I think we are designed differently, and we have a different constitution and different drives, different things that satisfy us.
Absolutely.
And going into that environment where you're dealing with bad car accidents and death and gang fights and drugs and stuff like that, when you walk away from it, it's difficult, mostly because of the peers you're leaving. I totally get it. PTSD is legitimate, and I wish that our culture embraced it better. Because PTSD can come from a lot of things, but certainly all first responders have some level of it, and a lot of veterans that see combat have it as well. And so, but to me, and this is a layman's term, I'm not a licensed counselor, I'm not a doctor, but to me, it's just a different type of injury. I think of the accident that you just got in. Now, because you were so physically fit, because your body was able to absorb that, that would have killed some people. Some people would have lost their leg. Some people would never walk again. Right? So you're seeing that the injury was the same, but because of the way, the condition your body was in when you received that injury, you had a better chance of survival and rehabilitation. I think the same is true for our mental state. You get into a trauma, and it's a mental injury. And for people, some people through DNA are just kind of wired, they're tough, and stuff just doesn't bother them. You know, I grew up on a farm and saw animals killed at a young age, and it just never bothered me. Now, that's not saying that I'm super strong. It's just that went into my worldview. I learned that at a young age, was desensitized to it. And so the first time, and I had actually experienced death through family members and friends growing up. So by the time I was on duty and I saw it, I don't think it had the same impact to me that it might to someone who didn't have those things. And that's not saying one of us is better than the other. That's just saying the conditions in which that trauma was absorbed has a different response.
Wow. It's so crazy, man. Because, when I had my motorcycle accident, flew 20 feet in the air. Literally, a car hit me on my left side and shattered this much bone. Flew 20 feet in the air, shoe got stuck on the pedal thing, and I landed on my right leg. Literally, the right leg saved me. You know, the amount of squats I did, the amount of strength I've been training. I trained my whole life. So in that moment, like you said, it's when I work out today, you know, waking up in the morning, I'm going to the gym. You don't think that something bad can happen to you, you know, but when it happens, all the hard work you did and the discipline you had to put in saved my life. You know, all that came back to me. You know, of course I was scared, you know, but my life literally flashed through me. Like some people would, you know, could have. But there was a first responder who came in at that scene and literally saved my life. He tied a knot on my leg, and saved me from bleeding out. But it was one person who also said, Jesus saved him. You know, the faith that I had, if I didn't have that faith, I don't think I would survive. Which is crazy. You know, the doctors did say, he could survive. He's in great shape. You know, everybody said this is a perfect time to do, you know, for this to happen. And I'm like, you kidding me?
Is there such thing as a perfect time to get run over by a car?
Is there such a thing? So, you know, it's just super crazy to know that everything that happened was meant to happen at that time, and no other time it was meant to happen. I wouldn't be sitting here talking about it, you know, without.
Well, hey, let me ask you a question, Mr. Interviewer. What if that accident had never happened? Where would you be right now?
I have no idea. Exactly. I don't know where I will be, because life changed when that happened.
Right.
I was never the same person. But it's how I wanted, it's who I wanted to meet. Like, who was that guy afterwards? And it was for me to decide to see if what I've always talked about, this warrior mindset. I've always talked about being strong. I've always, but it was time for me to actually put that in perspective.
Right.
Put that in my, really use that truly when my body is at its vulnerable state, when my body is, I didn't even know I was going to survive. So it's like, all right, now I have to change the way I live, So I don't know where I will be.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot
happen.
of what we're talking about is a foundation.
Right.
It's, you build that foundation, and it's in every area of your life. It's physical, it's mental health.
Yeah.
You can receive physical injuries, you can receive mental injuries, and then there's spiritual.
Yeah.
And it based, the scripture talks about the guy that built his house on the rock is the one that stood during the storm.
That's right.
The one that built his house on the sand got washed away because the foundation was no good.
Yeah.
And so it is doing the work. It's doing the work every day. And it's hard. So you now have perspective that very few people have, because you know that if I skip a workout today because I don't feel like it,
yeah,
and I go 60% when I don't feel like it, that will weaken the foundation. That if you were to ever have another accident,
yeah,
right, and now your job as a coach and as a mentor to people is to help give them your lens.
Yeah.
Give them that view to say, here's why I'm pushing you today.
That's
and it doesn't have to be a motorcycle accident. It can just be losing your job. Do you not have the mental strength to push through when something bad happens because you haven't been putting in the work?
Wow. That's so crazy, man. It's literally, it's that foundation. And when something happens, you can either use it as an opportunity to really enrich other people's lives as well. And I'm not gonna lie to you, man, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still trying to figure out, the bigger purpose of what had happened, So it's just a consistent, self-reflection for me to be able to translate that into people. I realized that I became stronger in this experience, and realized that not many people has reached that kind of strength, because they haven't, maybe they have, but it just feels like I've become even more stronger than I was before when I was okay.
Right.
But
I don't put so much pressure on yourself that you feel like you have to have this like dissertation of how to give everybody. All you have to do is share your testimony.
Yeah.
And let's just use your training as example. When you're pushing someone in training and they're struggling, that's when you share your testimony.
Right.
Hey, I push myself because I know what can happen if you don't push yourself.
Yeah. And
then you share your story.
Exactly.
You don't have to have you. If God wanted you to know more about your whole purpose right now, you would know more.
Absolutely.
But you're right here, right now, and you can only deal with what you know.
Wow.
And you know a lot from the last year, but then your character and the strength of your values that you've had for so many years, those things just ooze out of you naturally, because that's just your personality and that's who you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're going to be learning about this for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And this is a life-changing event. And, I think back to horrible circumstances I found myself in different times in life, and I'm still learning from them. because I can look back and I look at the mistakes I made and how I responded to them, or look now at a broader way on how other people played a role in it that I didn't see at the time. And you just never stop learning, but you got to put in the work.
You got to put in the work. Welcome back.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. So going into our second part of this, I want to ask you, being a first responder, how is that, like when you just go to, when you get called, you get a phone call saying there's something here, there's a shooting happening. Let's say there's a shooting happening. Somebody just got in a car accident. You get that call, you're there. Talk about that mindset and how you are able to just go into this different mindset to be able to be the vessel of being a helping hand to somebody, or just, this is a dangerous situation, but I'm willing to be here to be a help. Talk about that for a little bit.
So one word I would insert is doing it effectively. There's a lot of people that want to get there. The journalists want to get there to take pictures. People want to get there with their phone and record it. I think for first responders, a lot of it comes down to training. Training and having worked alongside some amazing people. So there's this adage, during the fog of war, people always look for the calmest guy in the room.
Wow.
And that person is someone that has maybe not been in that circumstance before, but they've been in the chaos. They've been in the fire. They've been in the situations where sometimes your actual training doesn't tell you what to do, but they've learned to be calm. You think of when Jesus told Peter to get out of the boat. He was calm at first. And then he started looking at the waves. Right. And so, I think that's true for the first responders that are effective.
That's right.
Some people still experience fear and push through. I mean, that's really, to me, what courage is. A lot of us don't experience fear in the sense of it's kind of premeditated. When you're driving there and you're running code and you're just trying to get there as fast as you can, you're really just focused on what's here right now. And it's get there safely and quickly. And then when you get out of the car, you run and you start addressing whatever the threat or whatever the conditions are when you find it. And it's not like the whole time you're driving there, you're thinking, oh my gosh, this could be painful. This could go really bad. You're just not thinking like that.
Right.
And I think the further you get in your career, the more natural that comes to just kind of ignore some of those flight responses because somebody needs help or they wouldn't have called.
Right.
And so, but training and mentors, I worked around some amazing people that, sometimes when I was younger would just kind of look at me and clown me a little bit and be like, why don't you just slow down? and just, you get around those people and it's in any walk of life, but the people that just have the calm confidence. And to me, it always came down to what's the worst thing that could happen? Think about that and then decide, what would I do if that worst thing happened?
Right.
Okay, now I have a plan.
Wow.
And then I go. Like going through training and muscle memory and learning the things, like the guy that put the tourniquet on your leg. I bet he's done that in training dozens of times.
And the opportunity just showed up.
Right. And so it wasn't, he didn't have to read a medical book after he found you on the pavement. It was just his training told him that that's what had to be done at the time. So he did it. Wow. And it saved your leg and maybe your life.
That's right.
And ththose guys are to be applauded because they're the ones that when the building runs on fire and we're all running out, they're the ones running in. When the bullets start flying, the officers are the ones to run in there. And it's but again, for stuff like that, I think it's a wiring. Like you think about people that go to combat pretty unprepared. 18-year-old wants to go into the military to get free college. Well, that's free college doesn't mean much when you're low crawling through the sand as the AK rounds are flying over your head. But but I think training is what gets people through.
Wow. That leads me to my next question. Like, we hear where it's a safe area, but we drive. We in the civilian world where, we are also civilians as well. Bullets are not flying over our head except in certain neighborhoods.
Yeah.
But you being in combat, a true warrior, and the things you're seeing, it's like it's what I see in the movie, man. It's what most people see in the movie, but can't imagine that happens in the world. You can't imagine that's literally what's going on as well. Even right now, there's people who are sitting not knowing that, yeah, they have it good here, but there's also other parts of the world that are going through it, like, a military man. So talk about that warrior guy, man. I say I'm a warrior. I'm a warrior here because of the mindset I have to have towards certain challenges in life. The enemy always throws arrows at us. But I know that if I'm a warrior in Christ, I know that I can strike with his wisdom, with his strength. It's not my strength. I'm not relying on my strength. Just like a normal warrior.
When David took down Goliath,
yeah.
Do you think it was David's accuracy with the rock, or was it God's?
It was God.
Right. And so there's a great book out, and I forget who wrote it. It might be Max Lucado, but Facing Your Giants. If anybody's listening to this and any of this resonates, go read, or at least cheat like I do and watch the summary version of it, Facing Your Giants. And really the crux of the whole book, spoiler alert, is the King Saul and all of the mighty army is out on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And Goliath comes out and taunts them every day. And they're shaking in their boots. Because all they see is Goliath.
Yep.
And here comes this little shepherd boy. And he hears this giant, saying bad things about the Israelites and, more importantly, about their God.
Right.
And he's like, why isn't someone killing this guy? And David knew, he's like, well, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Because David never, if you read the text, Saul and the Israelite army all talk about Goliath.
Yep.
And there's a number to it. Like they mention they mention Goliath 70 sometimes in the first few chapters. David walks on scene. He mentions the giant, I think, twice, and he mentions God 13 times because that's where his focus was. And yeah, he went out and he grabbed the stone and he did that, and it impressed a lot of people.
Yeah.
But he'd already done that before. He did it with a bear.
Many times.
He did it with a lion. I'm sorry, I had the privilege of seeing lions in South Africa, and I'm not trying to go at them with a sling, right? And
you only have one rock,
right? And so you're asking me about kind of defining a warrior, and that's how I define a warrior, because David made a ton of mistakes, and even your most elite tier 1 CAG SEALs, they still make a ton of mistakes. But it is about a mindset, and spiritually speaking, that mindset is being focused on God.
Yeah,
there is nothing he can't do, and if he's called you to a battle, then all you have to do is rely on him, because if at worst case scenario is you lose that battle. If you're relying on God, then that's what God has for you.
Wow.
But if God has it for you to win, in the case of David, he's like, well, I'll just use my sling. They wanted to give him armor. They wanted to give him a big sword. He's like, no, that's not my thing. Wow. Just give me my sling, and I'm going to go kill this fool, and then we're all going to roll out of here.
With faith, man. Yeah. He was able to say, with one rock, I will defeat this giant.
And it's that mindset. It's all he sees is God's power, God's providence, and that's all he's focused on. There could have been 10 giants out there. And I think David would have had the same posture, because he wasn't looking at the fear. He wasn't looking at the potential loss of a job or the sick child. Wow. He wasn't looking at that thing in life that seems like it's crushing your soul.
Wow.
That's what Saul and the Israelites were looking at.
Wow.
David walked on the scene and he's like, they're disrespecting him. Mm-hmm. They need to die. And he didn't look out there and think, ooh, wow, yeah, well, that guy's big. Maybe that's not my fight. He never hesitated. And everyone was like, there's no way this kid's going to do it.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say about that, in that whole storyline, remember, whoever won that fight won the battle. Mm-hmm. So at some point, the King Saul and all of those mighty warriors mm-hmm. had to concede. If this little fool walks out and loses this fight, we lose to the Philistines.
Wow.
So God even changed their minds. Like, mm-hmm. all right, I guess we're letting the kid do this for us because he's talking mad strength about God.
Yeah.
And if he's that focused, then let's let him go fight for us. And it wasn't about that. Nobody in their right mind looked at David and thought, you know what? Maybe this guy can kill that giant. But I think that they were caused to reflect onto God's power and God's ability to win this battle for them.
Yeah.
Being a warrior is all about mindset. You go and you talk to some of these amazing tier 2, tier 1 guys that have been through the craziest training, that have now gone and kicked the dust. I mean, you think of the Jocko Willinks and some of these other guys that have rose to fame mm-hmm. now because of podcasts and other things. Mm-hmm. Back in the day when they were doing it, when they were fighting the bad guys, when they were living through horrific circumstances, their mindset is what got them through. When you listen to Luttrell, when he got blown off the mountain, he said in one of his presentations, I heard him say, if I knew I had to crawl 7 miles, I might not have done it. But instead of doing that, he reached out as far as he could and he drew a line in the sand. And he drug his dead legs over that line.
Wow.
And then he drew another line. And all I had to do is crawl over that line. And he did that for miles. And getting started out, if his mindset was, man, I got miles to go, I don't know if I'm going to do this, all that doubt creeps in. Where was his mindset? I just need to get right here. Being a warrior is about a mindset. And you can be a warrior for your kids. You can be a warrior in your job. It all comes down to where is that mindset. Well, you had Prater on here not too long ago, right?
I did.
I tell you, I don't even know that guy, but I guarantee when he gets ready for a game, he's going to go through the same repetitions and he's going to get his mind right. And every time he goes out there, he can't control everything, but you see that guy's just dialed in and he's got his mind right. He's a warrior on the football field and he's got the right mindset.
Wow.
That's why he's like 93 years old and still kicking.
It's just super crazy, man, because that holds truth. When he's ready, when the season is here, he is locked in.
Yeah.
And it plays the same with that. So it's being a warrior in a battlefield and being a warrior in life. So you're telling me it's same concept, just by trusting God, seeing this giant in front of us, and being able to be David with the strength from God. So it just it's crazy to know that the same kind of power we can hold in as true warriors, like warriors who can be called in a battle, and warriors who can be called to go play this big game, to serve for our families. It all plays in that, with the same faith.
And where's your mindset?
And where is your mindset?
Because you think of all the coaching that you've done for kids and all of the personal training that you've done for people. You can tell when they're starting to get discouraged, right? Yeah. And you give them that little something that they need. Maybe it's hey, you can do this, or hey, just 2 more. You're helping reframe their self-doubt.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true for us, whether it's wherever it's at in life, and especially in the spiritual battles that we have, where we're struggling with sin, or we're struggling with doubt, or all the things that we struggle with. If you sit there and focus on all the bad stuff that could happen, and you don't make a plan for how you're going to deal with it when that does happen, you've already lost.
Yeah.
But the people, that show up with a smile on seemingly every day, those people that just seem to always have it locked in.
Yeah.
Those are the people that are getting up in the morning and setting their mindset for the day. And they do it every single day.
And it's about that consistency too. That consistency in, like you mentioned earlier, the consistency in following Christ, in knowing that his ways will get me to heaven one day. It's that consistency of waking up in the morning and saying, I have to thank God. I know that I don't know what this day may hold, but I plan to do this and this, and I hope that God is in it. A lot of people, like you said, they get full. Mm-hmm. God gives them these blessings, man. But so their discipline and momentum in continuously trusting in God or continuously relying on God goes away when they get blessed up with all that kind of things, But let's talk about, I know you, when I was listening to the podcast you did with Chris, you mentioned taking the cape off. What does that mean, taking the cape off?
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's for first responders and for veterans.
Yeah.
But I also see it in teachers. I see it in other, coaches and other things. So, and parents, to be quite honest. But we take on roles in life. And in the example of a first responder, you put on a badge and carry a gun, and you walk into every single room you walk into. You show up with what's called officer presence.
Mm-hmm.
Officer presence comes with the authority from the government. Typically, it comes with deadly force.
Yeah.
You carry that wherever you go. And, I've been on calls before, and probably the hardest thing for me to do is to deal with a sick or dead child.
Wow.
That one's tough.
Yeah.
And after something like that, something like that happens, and I think a lot of ER people that work in the ER, they're seeing this all the time. There's not a good mechanism for people to take their cape off, and it's a gross but necessary evil, because if I feel like, hey, I need to tell my supervisor, you know what, that one messed me up a minute, I need a day off, or at the end of like a shooting or something where it's been bad.
Yeah.
They'll come around and they'll debrief everybody. And it's usually like, hey, you good? Yeah, I'm good. And then you just move on.
Wow.
But there's no way to off-gas that trauma. And, same thing in the military. Because if you're deployed and, we used to, when you walk into the chow hall, right before you get to the hand wash stations, there's just pictures
mm-hmm.
of guys that are gone. And you walk by that, and, they have the table set for one, and nobody ever sits there as kind of a memoriam to them.
Yeah.
And man, that just wrecks you.
Yeah.
And I guess you could call a chaplain and say, hey, I need to talk to somebody,
yeah.
but you got to go back out in the field that day.
Wow.
So there's no opportunity to take that cape off. And what that means is there's no opportunity to be vulnerable. There's no opportunity to be real honest and just say, I'm struggling with this, or to have somebody who's really skilled pull it out of you, because you stuff it down inside because you feel like you got to be tough, and you got to wear the Superman cape, and nobody can ever see a chink in the armor.
Yeah.
Because it is true. If there are 10 of us on duty, and I know one guy is telling everybody he's not fit for duty that day because of some stuff we dealt with the day before. Now, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, but when he says he can come back to work, mm-hmm. can I really trust him?
Yeah.
I don't know what the right answer is, other than to say there has to be more intentionality behind it. We some departments, certainly in the military, you get a physical every year. Why
mm-hmm.
aren't we doing a psychological every year?
Mm.
What we do a benchmark. We say you're fit for duty if you can pass the MMPI multi-personality inventory, and you can run a mile and a half. Okay, now you're in, go. Then we make you run a mile and a half every year, but we don't go back to the benchmark of your
right.
potential psychosis and review any of that. So that concept of taking the cape off, and then think of parents. Think about that stay-at-home mom that is pulling her hair out, and maybe she's got some drama with some friends or some family, like we all do, and those kids aren't giving her a break. And then, spouse comes home and isn't really giving her a break, being demanding. They're both dumping garbage on each other. There's an opportunity to really take that cape off unless you have people come around you.
Wow. People
that you can be honest with and people that'll be honest with you. Like if you and I get together regularly, sometimes I'll hold the mirror up and be like, I see this going on.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're the one that needs to hold the mirror up for me. Be like, you need to take a look at this. You haven't been acting like yourself. Or I heard you talk to your wife like that the other day. That's not like you. And I don't think that's what you would want. Are you seeing this?
Yeah.
Have those kind of reflections between two good friends. A lot of first responders don't have it. A lot of teachers don't have it, So it comes back to being in a community, being around people that you give trust to and that you can be accountable to, that aren't going to hold it over your head, and that will give you that time that, hey, you need a couple days to just unwind and let some of this stuff out. Do it, because we know you'll come back stronger. You'll be even a better warrior when you come back.
Exactly. And it's about that big giant we face, man. That's a big giant. But if you continuously just seeing this giant show up and you can't control it, it's gonna truly defeat you. The giant of continuously being a hero and like a first responder. Today is over. Oh, I gotta go back to work tomorrow. And then boom, something big also happens out there. There's literally no slow day for someone like that. And what a concept to truly embody and say, you know what, today I will take my cape off and truly surrender and talk to somebody. And yeah, you're right. Not a lot of people are very privileged enough to have someone on their side. So that mental warfare is always just happening. And sometimes we push people away. There's this thing that happens to us when we push people away because nobody really, we have this idea where nobody really understands us, But when we truly just, like you said, just surrender, take your cape off, talk to somebody, seek help, you will be able to be a better hero, right? A better warrior.
There are two alternatives. You don't take the cape off and you keep stuffing it, and you continue to lose some of your ability to respond well. You're starting to lose some of that superhero power, and that's going to continue to decline because you've just decided I can't ever really deal with this, maybe until I retire or until I'm dead. Versus taking some time out to deal with it so that you can come back stronger and that you can have that kind of authenticity in dealing with the way you handled it.
Wow. That's just powerful, man. So, and I think this also ties into to your podcast. Like, talk about, you are the CEO of 100 Proof Living. Talk about that. Talk about that podcast of yours. What?
So we started that. A few of us got together to start a company, and it was really revolved around alcohol consumption as provided by employers. So it's not saying that people shouldn't drink, not saying drinking is a sin. It's not saying anything other than the CDC has determined that binge drinking is an epidemic in the United States.
Wow.
Binge drinking is, I think the numbers are 5 or more drinks for a male, 4 or more for a female in one sitting. And, there've been a lot of times in my life when I've not considered myself drunk, but I've had more than 5 drinks.
Right.
And so we started to dig into the science of it. And, there are hundreds of billions of dollars of lost revenue every year because of lost productivity, people not showing up to work, calling in sick on Monday. Wow. And then that's the one thing that they can measure. The other thing that they can measure is the astronomical direct spend on healthcare. All of the alcohol-related deaths, accidents, dismemberments, loss of work, and then loss of life from liver disease, heart disease, stroke, all of the other things that come from excessive drinking. What we did with 100 Proof Living was to put that responsibility on corporate America. Because if you work in finance or law, chances are you take your clients out for drinks. You take your team out for drinks. You have a national sales meeting with drinks. Everything involves drinking. And so what that's saying is, from the corporate standpoint, it's saying, hey, we value drinking in your life, and we're going to keep providing it. I know of a law firm that during COVID, they saved $350,000 in 1 quarter on alcohol.
Wow.
And so, but again, it's you're waiting for someone to, pull their pants down at a Christmas party because they're so drunk, or hit on their secretary, or whatever it is. You're waiting for that to happen. And then when it does, you fire that person. Okay, but you subsidized the alcohol that they drank, and you encouraged it, because now if you show up to a sales meeting and you're the person that, by diet reasons or personal beliefs, or maybe you have some addiction issues, you've chosen not to drink, now you're the pariah. And everyone's like, oh, you don't drink? Now you don't feel that familiarity and that cohesiveness with your team because you're the one person that doesn't drink.
Yeah.
And so 100 Proof Living was created to help raise awareness in corporate America that they are funding the destruction of their productivity. And and there's science behind it. The CDC, the NIL, a ton of other agencies have looked into this. And the problem is, and why we're not continuing to push that initiative anymore right now, we've kind of put it on the shelf, is because America wants their booze. And they don't want to let it go. And again, I'm not saying drinking is wrong, but when it impacts your ability to work, if you wouldn't buy a racehorse and feed it garbage. You'd buy a racehorse, you feed it race feed, right? And yet, they're taking soda machines out of a lot of schools because we're starting to figure out, well, you shouldn't put sugar into these kids and expect them to be awake all afternoon. We're starting to make some of the, it was 1964 when the Surgeon General said that smoking was bad for you. It took almost 50 years for us to legislate that out of the norm. So now you can't smoke in a public building. You can't smoke in a government vehicle. We've now finally made those changes. I think someday it'll come. Someday the legislators will come for alcohol. I don't know what it'll look like, but that was our intent behind that.
Man. And my last question for you today is, sometimes, when we most people rely on drinking because it's my get out. It's a secret get out for most people. If I drink, my problems will go away. But then you wake up, you get sober, and then the problems never moved.
Right.
And then you continue to drink. So I want to talk about, you talked about knowing about God and knowing God. When we fall into mental warfare, we can either, smoke, drink to numb that. But when we do that, we know about God. We know, we hear about God everywhere. God is not invincible. He shows up. He shows up for us. And some people say, yes, I know God. Yeah, he's really, but there's the ones that know God and that relies on him and not on the drinking. And, they don't worship drinking. So talk about that. Like,
I got a great example for you.
Yeah.
You ever listen to Joe Rogan?
I do.
Love that guy. He's got, I used to watch him back on that news show when he was doing his first TV. If you have listened to Joe for, let's say, a year, let's say you listen to his podcast every day, you watch his stand-up, you listen to him when he's commentating UFC, you know a lot about Joe.
Yep, I do.
If Joe walked into this room, would he know who you are?
Absolutely not.
Right. So you don't know Joe.
Yeah.
You don't have a relationship with Joe,
Wow.
even though you know a lot about him.
Yeah.
And he's easy because so many people have heard of him. And you kind of get, you watch the show for long enough and you start to kind of feel the vibe, like, we're bros, like, I bet we would hang,
Right.
we'd have a great time. But I don't know what his favorite color is. I don't know if he's married. I don't know what his kids' names are. I don't know who his parents are. I don't know him.
Yeah.
I just know a lot about him.
Wow.
And the same can be said for God. There's so much good information out there for people that maybe don't have faith in God, or even people that think that they have faith in God but don't really have a relationship with God. And that's really what we're called to. But simple things like the entire global calendar, BC and AD, based on the life of one man, Jesus Christ.
Wow. Yeah.
There's a lot of eyewitness testimony in non-biblical accounts that Jesus died and rose from the dead.
Yeah.
It was predicted hundreds of years before that would happen. Since all of those things have happened, I'm a believer. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons why I believe. Part of it is because God revealed himself to me. I had a relationship with him because he entered into a relationship with me.
Wow.
And the difference is having that one-to-one relationship to say, I know God. I know when I disappoint him. I know what his favor feels like. I know when it's his blessing in my life and not something I've done. But the difference really does come from, if you read the whole book, you could say a lot about God.
Yeah.
But if you're not talking to him and you're not receiving his message, then you don't actually know him.
Wow. That's perfect, man. Because, and when you get to know him, your life becomes abundantly blessed. When you turn your focus on him, he's able to get to know you. He already knows you. He formed you. But when you create that relationship with God, you release. You can go in your room and just have this conversation with him, which is that relationship of knowing God. It's the most powerful thing that I know I've ever experienced in my life. So, Brian, as we finish up, what is one advice you would give me as a young man, Because it's I'm only 27, like you, and you've been there. Right now, moving forward in life, what would you advise other 27-year-olds or people younger? What would you tell them? What advice would you give us?
So I would do an inventory of your values, and it's an exercise that, there are tools online, or you can just sit with someone and, what's really important to you, and come up with a list of priorities. And I know that for you, your faith is going to be your top priority.
Yeah.
But it might not always be your top priority. And so do a inventory of your values, prioritize them, and then develop some tools that you can employ every single morning to make sure that you got your priorities right.
Wow.
It's easy throughout the day for something to happen and it changes. You get a call about a sick family member. Doesn't mean your faith is no longer a priority, but your attention is on that sick family member. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, you need something to remind you that your faith is your priority. And then whatever that looks like. And some of those might change over time, and that's okay. I just wouldn't want life dictated to me what my priorities were.
Yeah.
Versus being intentional. And what I'm encouraging you to do is figure out what your priorities are, and then find a way through muscle memory to keep recalibrating every morning and step off fresh every day with your priorities in order.
Wow. Thank you, Brother Brian.
Yeah.
This was truly a pleasure and an honor to have you here on Belite Podcast. And I appreciate you finding time to come and have a chat with me, man.
Appreciate it.
It's always good to see you, brother.
Yeah, you too.
I appreciate you.
Can't let it go this long.
I can't let it go this long, man. Yeah. And it's truly an honor to have you on here. And I will use what you shared with me today, man, because you've experienced you've experienced a lot, and sharing your wisdom to someone like me who still has a long way to go
Yeah.
truly means a lot, man. And I appreciate you, brother. All right, awesome, man. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.